Life Baseball History. Hey, welcome to the show tonight. It's been a great week. Yeah, we had a wonderful show yesterday. In case you missed it, you can go back and listen to it in replay. Talked about a lot of interesting things. Of course, the conversation continues tonight, and we're going to keep this broadcast just as live as it can be for as long as we can keep it. Hey, I will tell you, don't forget to subscribe if you like what I'm doing here. It doesn't cost anything, it just lets you know when I'll be coming on live. So, by all means, do that. If you have some friends who are baseball fans, we're trying to build a community out here of baseball fans, especially those who want to learn more about the Negro baseball leagues, right? Who want to learn about the league from somebody who has lived this life and gone out and interviewed hundreds of people and family members, traveled all over the country for this is going into my 46th year. So we're 3 months into my 46th year. Just imagine that, guys. I was 23 when I first headed out to talk about the Negro Leagues and to meet Negro League players. And that first guy that I met, now I did know Mr. Dwight before then. Actually, I knew his brothers too. He had two brothers, Boots and Bus, and they lived in our community. They were good friends with my father, but I didn't follow him for baseball. But I certainly heard people talking about he had played for the Kansas City Monarchs, even though I didn't know much about the Kansas City Monarchs at that time. So the first real bona fide player that I actually interacted with and asked questions about the Negro League had to be Carol Ray Mapple, Dink Mapple, one of the greats, great utility man. He was living in Topeka, Kansas at that time, where I can tell you some great stories about Mapple, his family, and his legacy in baseball. So that's where it all started. That was 1980. And of course, I was that little kid that back in the 60s where they say, hey, this kid knows a lot about baseball. And I certainly did because I was reading stuff like this, the Baseball Register and the Sporting News and things like that. And that's how I kind of garnered my knowledge. All right. So there's a lot of people out here now talking about the Negro Leagues, guy. But if you want to hear information from an original person who got information from people firsthand, not information from something somebody wrote, but somebody who actually played, somebody who actually knew those people, someone who was an actual family member. And we're not talking about a granddaughter or a great granddaughter or a great grandson. I'm talking about a daughter and many times a wife. So that's the kind of legacy I bring here to you. And so it's a whole different kind of vibe. All right. So if you're vibing with that, you're in the right place. Okay, my name is Phil S. Dixon. Of course, I'm a published author, and so you can pick up some of my books. This is the latest one. If you don't have this one, hey, look how thick that thing is. And it talks about the 1910 Chicago Leland Giants. And guys, I go in depth and I tell you about players in ways that other people don't bother to talk about it, right? So once you read some of my books, you will learn a lot. And guys, you'll be so powerful that people will think, hey, I know more than that guy, but I don't know if that be the case. But anyway, you will be empowered. All right, so now here's the thing. I'm about 20, 26 people short of getting to 700 uh, subscriptions. So if you haven't subscribed, guys, go ahead and do that. Somebody said, now I'm looking, I appreciate you letting me know. Said, lived in Oakland, met Reggie Jackson. You know, I didn't know Reggie, but I knew his brother, James Jackson, was a good friend of mine. And James actually spent the night at my house one time. James was actually a really good guy. And I keep saying to myself, if I ever see Reggie and I get a chance to talk to him, and I tried to talk to him in Birmingham, there was just too many people around. I just couldn't get to him. And the first question I would ask, I said, where's James? Because James was my good friend. And man, I remember going out to Los Angeles. We were doing an event. Jim Brown was there. Bussy from the Lakers, the owner of the Lakers, was there at the event. Don Newcomb, he was sitting at our table at that event. And James Jackson was there too. So afterwards, we went to a couple of night spots down in Los Angeles. And the next morning, we got up and went to a restaurant, soul food restaurant, all you can eat in Marina Del Rey. I think it was called Aunt Kizzy's Back Porch or something like that. Anybody from Los Angeles recognize that name? It's gone now. But this is probably I want to say this was probably in the 90s. Yeah, before, So James Jackson, yeah. So that was my buddy too, man. I tell you, uh, he was a good guy. And I don't know where James is now, but I would love to know if anybody knows anything about where James is, but let me know. I'd reach out to him in a heartbeat. All right, so here we're going to go. We're going to go and start with the March 14, 2026 edition of This Day in Black Baseball History, guys. And just so I can get to that 26 subscribers, I'm going to mention it more than once tonight. So don't worry about the redundance, okay? So here we go. March 14th, 1887. I'm going to go back, way back. Delegates representing Pittsburgh, Louisville, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, and Baltimore met in Baltimore to adopt a constitution to govern a National League of Colored Baseball Players. That was back in 1887. How many times do you think a Negro League was attempted? Man, that is a question I probably need to look at in more detail, because not only do you have the national uh, people trying to organize, but you have regional teams trying to organize into leagues too. So there was a lot of that going on, and people are always trying to make a real go of it. Of course, you know that he didn't have a full league until 1920. So, all right. Hey, if you could just keep your conversation and keep your comments relative to baseball, guys. And so I'm going to remove a few here because I'm trying to stay with the baseball, guys. And I understand there's a lot going on in the world, and I certainly appreciate that. But I can't deal with all of that because, um, I'm a guy here trying to do the best I can. And I talk about baseball, so I try to let the people who are in charge, the people we vote for, make the right decisions. And so even if you didn't vote for certain people, you still hope that the people who were elected on either side, of course, in America, we're pretty much Republican and Democrat, that they're going to make good decisions in our behalf. All right. So let's keep the conversation to baseball. Certainly would appreciate that. All right. Okay. So let's see. And with the league, they asked for a $50 guarantee to visiting teams, and it was agreed upon, and a schedule will be presented to the delegates tomorrow. And I may come back and talk about that schedule, okay? $50 guarantee. So if you can get to the town, you guaranteed at least $50. And I don't know what $50 was equivalent back in 1887. Maybe someone can adjust that out for inflation, and we can get a real look at what that was. All right. So let's go to March 14th, 1913. And Foster, that's Ruth Foster, Chicago American Giants, put a whipping on the Pacific Coast League Portland Beavers for the second day in a row. And of course, you go tomorrow. Yesterday, you can hear about that game. So they edged them today by a 6-5 score in Visalia, California. Okay, and that's where they're playing a 4-game series every day. And this is the second game. The Chicago Lillian Giants have won the first two. Okay, and Bill Lindsay, man, did you see the baseball game where they had the teenage baseball players striking out Judge over at the Yankees? Did you see that? Well, I tell you what, Bill Lindsay was that kind of guy. Bill Lindsay, as a teenager, he struck out 19 of the Chicago Leland Giants, and I think he was 16 or 17 at that particular time. That is the most strikeouts of a Leland Giant team under Ruth Foster. Nobody struck out that many. He was so good that Ruth Foster came back, and that was in 1909 when he could achieve that feat. Ruth Foster talks his parents into letting Bill Lindsay join the Leland Giants, and he joined them at the tail end of the 1910 season, and I write about it in this book. So that's Bill Lindsay. So he's still pitching good. He allowed 9 hits and struck out 6 and beat 2 of their pitchers in winning the game. One of them was Harry Krause. The other one was Al Carson. Of course, Krause tossed 525.1 innings in the major leagues. How about that? But how about this? He's not beating the Chicago American Giants. That's why I tell people, and you've heard me say it before, that's why merging the statistics was so important, because for years we were getting a skewed history of who were the greatest baseball players ever. So here you have Krause, 525 innings, and he can't beat the Chicago Leland Giants, Chicago American Giants by then, 1913. Okay, and then of course Frank Duncan, the outfielder, and he's from Macon, Georgia. Uh, Vastly underrated, and I talked about enough. He slammed a grand slam in the second inning, and it was only his one hit of the day, and he scored Bill Lindsey, Bruce Petway, and Fred Hutchinson on that grand slam. Later on, Pete Hill added another home run over the right field fence with Fred Hutchinson aboard, and Hill finished the game going 3 for 5 and stole a base. And he stole a base the day before, so he stole 2 bases in 2 games and hit a home run. Of course, today he went 3 for 5. That's Pete Hill. Pete Hill is one of the great John Preston Pete Hill. I'm telling you, I talk about him a lot. He's on this team again. He's on this team. So is Frank Duncan. They're all on here. They're in this book. You can learn a lot about those guys. If you have not acquired that book yet, guys, that's one you want to have in your library. I wouldn't lie to you. That's one you want to have. All right. And let's see. What else do I have in here? Okay, so they're going to play again tomorrow. So I'll be back with the third game of the series. All right. Okay, so let's go to another. March 14th, we're going to jump up to 1924. So we're going to go to Philadelphia now. And Dan McClellan, and he reorganized the Philadelphia Giants in 1923. Now, you know the Philadelphia Giants go back to the turn of the century. Saul White was their great manager, and they developed a lot of outstanding players, including Dan McClellan. He was on that team. But he reorganized the Philadelphia Giants in 1923, and they played 94%, if you imagine this, of their games are played on the road. So they're the Philadelphia Giants, but they're on the road, right? Quite a bit. Now, here's an interesting thing. I don't know if you know this. There are 3 kinds of barnstorming teams. Now, people talk about barnstorming, right? But there are actually 3 kinds. Well, the first one is somebody who travels regionally, so they're barnstorming regionally, all right? And then the second one is you have someone who maybe barnstorms, say, in a series of games, like Dizzy Dean did after the 1934 World Series. He barnstormed just at the end of the season, plays 13 or 14 games against the 4 different Negro League teams. That's another form of barnstorming. But then you have barnstorming teams who would leave in May and don't come back home until September. Maybe they might get back once or twice, but that's it. I remember talking to Georgia Dwight, and her son Eddie Dwight played for the Monarchs in 1933, and I think she said she saw him from April to October when the season ended. She saw him twice that year, twice. So you only see her husband twice. So he sent him back home money, and he sent the schedule where they're going to be. He sent back news clippings and everything, but physically he was not there. That's another kind of barnstorming. And a lot of people, when they talk about barnstorming, they just mention it in one collective thought, right? But no, there are different ways to barnstorm. And when you leave in April, May, and you don't come back to October, man, that's some real barnstorming there. And you don't play more than 2 nights in any one city in a row, right? You know, you may come back to that city when you cross that part of the country again, but you don't stay in that town very long. And so that is barnstorming. So his Dan McClellan's team was a barnstorming team, right? And so he was talking about some of his players he has, and I'm going to mention a few names that you may recognize, okay? So he had Iggy Dallard in center field, and Dallard ended up dying. He drowned, actually. Then he had a guy named Lockhart. He was a star, and he was from Morris Brown University. And then he had another guy named Brown. I don't know what his first name, and he was playing right field. And another guy named Richardson, who was in right field, who formerly played with Ben Taylor's Washington Potomacs. Then there was a guy named Crump at second base. He was an old Hilldale player. Ricks at first base, last year's team captain. And Cordora, a Cuban who formerly played with the Cleveland Stars. Don't hear much about the Cleveland Stars. Cleveland is the sleeper when it comes to Negro League baseball. We don't talk about Cleveland enough until you get like to the Cleveland team with the Buckeyes in the 40s. But guys, believe me, Cleveland was producing ball players all along the way. And so one of these days, I'm going to spotlight Cleveland and just spend a moment there. So, okay, so he had that guy. And then he had William Big C. Johnson. He was also a Morris Brown College, formerly with the Hilldale Homestead Grays. And now, I actually interviewed William Big C. Johnson. He was a former player who played in the 25th Infantry, played with the Harrisburg Giants, and he was living in New York when I interviewed him back in the 1980s. All right, so that's William Big C. Johnson. And let's go to another one. He's also got some pictures here. He's got a guy named Baptiste. Don't know what his first name was, but I do recognize this other guy, Webster McDonald. And he tossed three no-hitters in 1923. Just imagine this guy tossed three no-hitters in one summer, and we're not talking about it. I want to know. Now, Webster McDonald was one of the great submarine pitchers, pitched with the Chicago American Giants. Later on, he's with the Philadelphia Stars. And if you ever get a John Hallway book, there's one book where Hallway actually features an interview with Webster McDonald that gets kind of deep. So you want to pick that up if you want to know more about Webster McDonald. Of course, he had Willie Gibson Tanter, a left-handed pitcher formerly of the Kansas City Monarchs, and a guy named Luke Archer of Buffalo, New York. And that he was a former football and baseball star at Lincoln University in the East. Now, there's two Lincoln Universities. A lot of people don't know this. You have one in the East, then you have one in Missouri there at Jefferson City. So just know there's two Lincoln Universities. And if I'm correct, I think Monty Irvin might have gone to the other Lincoln University. Somebody can look that up and let me know, right? And so let's see if anybody else have, let's see. And then he had Campbell of the Boston Tigers and Garner, a crack southpaw pitcher from Savannah, Georgia. And Danny will have 25 players out to earn their Philadelphia Giants uniforms for the 1924 season. Yeah, boy. Somebody said Oakland A's. Let's see, I'm not sure. Are you joining me? Are you in Oakland? That's always a good question. All right, so let's keep it going here. I'm going to go, let me jump to the Louisiana Weekly. Now, we're going to jump all the way across to Arizona now. And in March 14th, the Louisiana Weekly newspaper reported that the Boston Red Sox were rolling out the welcoming mat for their first tan player, Elijah Pumpsy Green. The article said that the Red Sox are being notified, after being notified, of the existence of segregation in certain sections of Arizona. And now look, I thought segregation was only going on in the South. I bet you did too, because that's what we read. No, it was going on all over the country, including Arizona. So the Boston Red Sox picked that up. And so they have gone through great pains, that's the quote, to avoid any incidents. And Green has been given a nice quarters in Phoenix, a town with a sizable Negro population, and a car to use during the entire spring training. I bet you some players got mad. They said, why does he get a car and we got to ride on the team bus, right? And Joe Cronin, former general manager of the Red Sox and current American League president, approached key persons in Scottsdale and learned that there might be problems. And the housing question came into play. So Green is expected to be joined shortly by two other African Americans. You don't hear about these guys, right? So we're going to mention their names tonight and make sure that these are names that you get to hear about. And maybe you can look them up and see what they did. But one of them is Larry Plenty, a former Boston College catcher, now in the Army at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and another guy named Charlie Wilson, a pitcher with the Marines. And those were going to be the two other men of color joining the Red Sox right along with Pumpsy Green. Now, we heard about Pumpsy Green. I knew about Pumpsy Green being the last player in the black player in the American League. I knew about that. And the Red Sox were the last team in the National or the American League to integrate. And we knew about Pumpsy, but did you know about these other two guys that were with them? And Larry Plenty and Charlie Wilson. All right. All right, then, we're going to jump over to some modern day players that you might recognize. How about this one? Is everybody still with me? If you're still with me, give me a couple of hearts, guys, and let me know you're still in there. All right? I'm just kind of waiting to see if anybody can hit a heart or two. Well, I guess nobody's going to give the heart. Okay, so we're going to keep on rolling along, all right? There we go. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Okay, so we're going to go to March 14th, 1960. Saw this guy. I knew this guy, and I've mentioned him several times before. Anthony Kirby Puckett is born in Chicago, Illinois. He led the American League in hits 4 times between 1987 and 1992. This guy could really rake with the Minnesota Twins. Now, this is the part I always like to tell people because I'm from Missouri and I've spoken all over the state in different places. And I was down in Sikeston, Missouri. And of course, his father, William Alfred Puckett, was born and raised in Missouri. I don't know if you knew that. In a place called Charleston. He was born September 1st, 1910, in Charleston, Missouri. Now, I had spoken Sikeston, so there's many people there who knew about him and his connections to that area. And Sikeston was about 16 miles from Charleston. And then, of course, Elston Howard's dad also lived in that region. And so people talked about him. So he was about 16 miles too. And this is down around a place called New Madrid. You probably heard of the New Madrid Fault. Well, that's all around there. And if you ever get to Sikeston, there's a place called, Lambert's. Lambert's is a restaurant there. And it's an all-you-can-eat restaurant for certain foods. So you order your foods, and then you have people come by with big beakers or whatever you want to call, and they will come by and give you all the fried okra you want. They'll have fried potatoes, and then if you say you want an extra roll, you just raise your hand, and there's a guy with rolls, and he throws your roll to you. So they call it home of the throwed rolls. Look this up, guys. Don't take my word for anything. I just travel and have a great time talking about baseball, and I meet all these wonderful people and get to go all these places. And it's only happened because I fell in love with baseball as a kid, and I'm still here talking about it. So people still have me come to speak to various organizations and at events, right? Okay, so let's go to, I'm going to give you one more. March 14, 1974. Alex Pompeyes, owner of the New York Cubans, a scout for the New York Giants, died in New York, New York. Have you ever heard of Alex Pompeyes? Yeah, if you ever see that World Series, that long 1924 World Series, Pompeyes is in that one. And I had a lot to do with getting that published in 1980. And so I've actually known Pompeyes from the very beginning when I really started talking about the Negro Leagues. Let me tell you a little bit about Pompeyes. Now, he is currently a member of the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, I do ask this question because there's 2 people in the Hall of Fame that I could take issue with, and I'm not quite. Pompeyes might be one of them, and I'll tell you the reason why. Pompeyes was a numbers guy, right? So if you put Pompeyes in and you don't put Gus Greenlee in, I think something's wrong with that selection, right? So Pompeyes had a great history, but so did Gus Greenlee. So why is Pompeyes in and Greenlee not? Okay, and since they both were involved in, say, in the underworld, and with the numbers and all those kind of things, both of them, you can't hold that against one and then not hold it against the other. That's my whole point. So Pompeyes, in 1938, Pompeyes testified that Dutch Schultz. I mean, you used to watch the Untouchables, and they would mention people like that, Frank Nitti and Al Capone. How about Dutch Schultz in New York or in Pittsburgh, that area? And anyway, he was the boss in New York, and he took $10,000 from Alex Pompeyes in 1933. And Pompeyes testified of that as to that in court and lived to talk about it, right? Most people who talk against Dutch Schultz, well, they found him in the river somewhere, right? But Pompeyes was able to tell them that Dutch Schultz basically took $10,000 of his money. How much was $10,000 in 1933? That was a chunk of money, right? And on April 3rd, 1939, Pompeyes went down to Mexico trying to avoid the local authorities, and he was arrested in Mexico on an alleged policy banker charge, right? So anyway, I asked about how is Pompeyes in the Hall of Fame, and how about this? How is Effa Manley in the Hall of Fame when people like Gus Greenlee are, Frank Leland, and how about William Peters of the old Chicago Union Giants? Yeah, I read things back in the 1930s that said next to Ruth Foster, Peters was the most important man in black baseball, but he's not in the Hall of Fame and is rarely talked about. So, guys, I take this serious, and so if you want to hear a serious conversation, you need to be here. And these are the kind of conversations that I put into play because these are the things that concern me about what's going on in some of these Hall of Fame selections and who's remembered, who's not. But to me, they were all worthy of some type of recognition. If nothing else, get them in your state Hall of Fame, right? Get them in your state baseball Hall of Fame. And many of these players are not, the names I mentioned today. All right. So we got one more, and I'm going to go to March 14th, 1991. I didn't see him play that I can remember, but of course, I met him before. And so the Milwaukee Brewers traded outfielder Dave Parker to the California Angels for Dante Bichette. Remember Dante Bichette? And said, so I figured, okay, a lot of people know about Dave Parker. You know he had a gun. That guy could really throw from right field. So I said, what can I tell them that maybe typically you might not know? How about this? He was hit in the face with a baseball. And so he came back sooner than he probably should have. So on July 16, 1978, the 6'5" Parker was called upon to pinch hit in the 11th inning. Now remember, he's still recovering from being hit in the face. Is the prolific power hitter climbed out of the dugout. He didn't wear a traditional batting helmet. Instead, Parker added a half black, half yellow hockey goatee mask to his batting ensemble and came to bat with a hockey mask on. That is a first. And Dave Parker is a member of the Baseball Hall of Fame today. And I wish that they would have not taken so long and he could have actually walked across that stage instead of passing away and never actually getting a chance to give his Hall of Fame speech. But that's baseball for you guys. And that kind of wraps up another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Guys, I don't try to soft soap it. I just come in here, guys, and tell you what I really believe and what I really think about things that have gone on in baseball. I'm very opinionated, and I make no excuses for that. And so I hope that you can appreciate what I'm saying. I do want to thank you guys. And hey, we're trying to get that. I'd love to get those 25 this weekend if we could, those subscriptions. I don't know if I'll be able to get them all, but we're going to give it a good whirl, guys, okay? So I just want to thank you. And once again, share the broadcast if you can. I love whatever you do. And believe me, your sharing has got me to where I am today, right? And your listening, your support is nothing that I've done magical myself. All the magic has been done by you. All right, so as I close tonight, I just want to leave you with a Satchel Paige quote. Satchel says, I don't like to remember with bitterness. Yeah, he said, I try to remember their greatness, for that's what they truly were. We're talking about some of the all-time legends from the Negro Leagues, guys. We're talking about their greatness. And as Satchel Paige said, for that's what they truly were. Thank you, guys, and I'll see you real soon with another edition of This Day in Black Baseball History. Thank you, guys. Have a nice evening and enjoy yourself. Be safe. And guys, by all means, let's build this community and let's talk some baseball. All right. Have a nice evening, guys. Bye.